Or, when I am in my crown and banner, do I always have kind of a slight smile on my face? Like, how do I hold my demeanor? Because people judge so easily because it's natural, right? It's an instinct. You can't help it. Like, you look at something or someone, you automatically have a judgment before you even, meet that person.
Welcome to the Bias for Action podcast with your host, Michael Fang. With a PhD in applied physics focusing on quantum computing and a number of years in long-distance running, I hope to give listeners a chance to go behind the scenes of high performers across a wide range of disciplines and perspectives. Uncovering the mindset and habits of those who strive to be the best will help you improve your life and accomplish your goals with actionable advice. Today on the show, we have Jennifer Sunahara. Jennifer has an interesting history that we're going to get into really fast. But for those who don't know, Jennifer is an endurance athlete, a cyclist, Instagram celebrity, amongst other things. But today on the show, we're going to be specifically asking her about how she's able to connect with others so well, and what her childhood experience in beauty pageants, in terms of how that's helped her build her confidence, in terms of how she's able to greet someone with a big happy smile. We're going to get into all of that. So let's begin there. But first, Jennifer, how are you doing today?
I'm tired.
What'd you do this morning?
I think I got a little too much sun between today and yesterday. This morning, one of my really, longtime friends from another running club hit me up. She's like, "Hey, I heard you got cobwebs on your bike. Let's go riding this Sunday." I was like, "Yeah, cool. Definitely can do that." And then this morning I was scrambling around, couldn't find my helmet, didn't know where my cycling cleats were. I literally have cobwebs still on my bike. I needed bike lube. I didn't know if my chain was going to fall off. I was pumping up my tires. I was like,
I feel like I hear this story every weekend when you need to do something.
I'm like, I haven't rode my bike, and I don't know. I think it's been years. It was nice to see the ladies this morning. My chicken tenders hurt from sitting on the saddle.
What is a chicken tender?
My chicken tenders. I call those my sit bones. So for anyone that's, rides bikes, or, if you haven't ridden a bike in a while, when you go out for a ride, your sit bones are going to be essentially sore. Super, super sore. And it's just something you got to build up to until basically saddle sore. So basically you got to build up to it, and you won't feel them anymore. But these next few days are going to be rough sitting down. But
before we get into all of your endurance endeavors, let's go back to your beauty days. I don't know what to call it, but I guess you were heavily involved in beauty pageants. And I don't know if it was your idea or your mom's idea, but how did you get into that whole area?
So basically, my sister was the one who was involved in beauty pageants. That's something she had always done. So when I was little, she would put me in basically Miss Hawaiian Tropic. Those were the local beauty pageants that were around. So the one interesting thing about that beauty pageant is you don't have to do anything besides wear a dress, get up on stage, look cute, and they basically judge you on your looks. Essentially, kind of sad to say. The big floofy hair and the big fluffy dress, and that's basically how it started. I liked it because I didn't have to talk. I didn't have to do a talent. There was a talent portion, but it was optional. What else was there? There was no, like I said, that you didn't have to talk, so there was no interviews, there was no swimwear. It was just literally you wear a dress, you get up on stage, you walk to this point, this point, this point, have your cute little smile, do your little wave, twirl, whatever, walk off.
And how old were you when you were starting to do this stuff?
Oh my God, this was 6 or 7 years old, something like that. So more on the younger side. And then I just kind of liked it and kind of kept doing it. But then I started getting older, and so I wanted to do something a little different. So I did win a couple when I was 16 with Miss Hawaiian Tropic, and basically from there you have to go down to LA, and they just take your money. It's just so expensive for nothing, unless you are Miss Hawaiian Tropic, and you get this like modeling contract out of it. But that was never going to happen.
And how much would these contests usually cost?
I don't even know. Maybe like 150 for just like the few seconds you're on stage. But then, that doesn't count about, your hair, buying the dress, buying the shoes, the makeup, and all of that. So,
and all that money, do the winners get anything like top 3?
No.
Not even?
Oh, you get a trophy. I think maybe a sash, maybe it was just for the top one, and maybe a small crown.
So it's not even as good as like a race entry where you get like a t-shirt, you get a medal. It's not even as good as that. It's worse.
No, it's definitely worse than that. There's no beer afterwards. Like there's no nothing. So basically you just show up, either win or lose, and then you go home. And, as a kid, I think that can be kind of, devastating because you just like, oh, was I not good enough? Or then you start getting into these kind of judgmental things like, oh, she's prettier than me. Or like, oh, I really like her dress. Like, oh, maybe my hair's not, it's not big enough. And so it can be kind of not demoralizing, but you start kind of thinking about the way you look, I think, a little bit more and be like, well, do I need to look like that? Like, is this what they're looking for? Because I think they definitely have like a standard, and you always want to try and fill in that look or that standard they're going for, essentially. So
is that what kind of drove you to start thinking about, I guess, what do others think about me and as an extension?
I think so. But, I just took a developmental psychology class. So all these kind of like memories of back in the days and, why I did certain things, it kind of, it makes more of sense. But like when you're going through your adolescence phase, basically it's like age 9 to I think 19 or so, those factors are always coming into play. Like for the general population of adolescents, they're very worried about what they look like and, how they appear to people. And, that's your puberty phase too, right? Like you're, oh my gosh, now I got my period. Like, what the fuck is this? You're like, this is so weird. Or, well, you don't know essentially, but, and so you just start going through all these things. And I think another thing too, is kind of being like a semi like only child has a factor in that too, right? I have my brothers and sisters, and I would see my sister more often than not, but she didn't really grow up with me. So I didn't really have that someone, I guess, to look up to as far as like, well, what do I wear here? What do I, what is this? Is this acceptable? Or, just to talk about, I think, certain things. So being judged all the time was something that kind of, like, that's something I thought about all the time. Like, what do people think of me? Because I never liked when people didn't like me, right? I mean, who would like that sort of thing? I
guess otherwise they just don't care.
Yeah, or you don't care. But, through that whole adolescence phase, and then it goes into the high school phase too, where I had girls are like, oh, I thought you were such a bitch. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, and then I got to know you and you're actually not, like, you're kind of cool. And I'm like, what? Do I give off like this persona? Do I have like a resting bitch face? Like, I don't know where that whole idea came from. So, going into beauty pageants, things like that, when I got into a different system, so to speak, so I got into more scholarships. So these beauty pageants, when you won these beauty pageants, you were given scholarship money. But the only way you were able to maintain your scholarship money is you had to make 25 public appearances within your community. So that's a huge thing, right? Now you're forced to be out there. You have to talk to people. You have to communicate. Otherwise, you don't get it. But
and what does that look like? Because when someone says, "Oh, it's 25 public appearances," or just going out to parks and shaking hands with kids, like what is the requirement there? I
mean, yes, kind of. So with this beauty pageant system, the one I was in, she basically did all of Sacramento. So, and like there's little smaller cities, like I was Miss Sisters Heights, I think when I was like 20 or 21. That was the first city I grew up in. And so basically because I had won, I was actually on the Chamber of Commerce. So every first Tuesday of the month, I actually had to go to a luncheon, and I would actually sit at the head table and look out into the crowd and just eat lunch. why they talked about things going on in the community. And it was just really weird because I was just like, oh my gosh, I got something in my teeth? Like, they're watching me eat. What if they think I eat too much?
Did you
like,
it kind of goes back to the just looking pretty thing, but did you actually engage in the conversation, or did you just sit there and eat?
Well, no. So this was the thing. My pageant director, she was definitely kind of like a go-getter. I was definitely shy. So actually I got involved in her beauty system, I think when I was 10, 11, 12. So fairly young. And she would come up to me. She was like, you see this person, that person, and that person, you're going to go introduce yourself to them. And I'd be like, no. Because I was so quiet when I was younger. Like, I was like, not afraid of family members, but I was like, I didn't want to like say hi. Like, it took me a while to warm up even to like my family members. Wow. And like going over there.
I can't even imagine you like that. I was like, what? Who is this girl?
I was just super shy. So this is why beauty pageants were so important growing up, is because so when I was younger, and my pageant director, her name was Mary, she would like walk me over there and be like, so what's your name? What's your title? What's their name? You know, be like, hi, my name is Jennifer, you know, blah. Like, just super quiet. I was like, this is embarrassing. But because she forced me to do it, it got me used to, 1, public speaking, 2, talking to people I don't know, and 3, presentation. She always said, no matter what, if you're in your crown and your banner or you're not, people are always going to be looking at you, and how you uphold yourself means something. And so this, this goes back to, the kind of the resting bitch face thing. It's like, is that really what I look like when I'm not engaging with someone? Or, when I am in my crown and banner, do I always have kind of a slight smile on my face? Like, how do I hold my demeanor? Because people judge so easily because it's natural, right? It's an instinct. You can't help it. Like, you look at something or someone, and you automatically have a judgment before you even, meet that person.
Do you think having those characteristics or behaviors kind of makes you shallow, though?
No, because it's, like I said, I think it's a natural human behavior. But then, like, you go meet them, like, so say, like, I judged you, and I'm like, oh, this guy's weird. And then I go, and I go and I talk to you, meet you, and I'm like, oh, no, he's, like, super cool. We got, like, a lot in common and things like that. But, first off, and you do judge. Like, I think that's a normal thing. But as long as you're able to judge and then kind of, I don't know, what do you call it? Take back your perspective, so to speak, and realize, what was I judging on and how is this person now? Maybe you do judge someone and I'm like, oh yeah, she's a bitch, and you go meet them, I'm like, oh, I was right, but most of the time it's just something, you learn.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the more sophisticated beauty pageants, what are the factors involved in being competitive, and what does it really take to win?
I think I definitely think it comes down to having confidence, right? Because when you're on stage, you can see it. You can see when you're having fun. You can see like when you're being energetic, and in your interviews and how you talk. So sometimes there were panel interviews, so all the judges were there, which is very intimidating. And sometimes there were one-on-one interviews, which are a little more personal, and you can kind of engage a little bit more and, kind of understand the personality of each judge. So you can kind of play on that. So when it comes to that, it's 1, knowing your community, right? Because they're going to ask you things about what's going on in the community. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Tell us about your goals and your future. They just want to see how well you're involved in things. And then when you're on stage, usually you have 3 types of wear. So you'll have formal wear. Sometimes you'll do swimsuit wear. It depends. This one, we did not do swimwear, but we did sports wear. And then we did, was that it? Maybe that was it. Maybe it was just sports wear, formal wear. And I couldn't remember. And then there was obviously like things like photogenic, right? So like who was on the front cover of the program, the back cover of the program. So you got judged on your pictures too. And then overall, like, I can't remember what the breakdown is, but like a portion of your interview is judged, your on stage personality is judged, and then your on stage interview question. So that I think is key, because we go to rehearsal, we practice questions, these could be questions we may or may not get. So when you're on stage and you get a question, you got to be able to be prepared to answer it, but answer it very fluid, clear, and concise.
Eloquently.
There you go. Without rambling on or just forgetting what the topic was, which has happened before. I'm like, oh shit, what's the question? I'm in the middle of like my speech and I can't remember, what it was. But I mean, it's having that confidence, and just like with anything, it takes practice, right? Got to get up and practice your smile. You got to practice your walk, especially if you get new heels. That's always tricky. But practicing, it's more like the interview and your personality and what are your goals and commitment to the community and how are you going to uphold those things.
How do you practice confidence unless you're constantly in situations like that? Or do you almost have to force yourself into situations where you have to show confidence?
That's a good question. I think for me personally, it was just being forced. Like I had to, right? Like my pageant director, go talk to them. Oh, okay. Like this is weird. Also, but kind of going off to the side, working retail for a really, really long time forced me also to talk to people, right? So now I'm building that confidence, and now I'm learning how to read people. So when someone comes in, with kind of like an attitude, I'm like, oh, well, that's just kind of the way like their ethnicity is. Like, don't take it personally. Or, really kind of diving into people's personality and figuring out like, oh, what brings you in today? Like, oh, I have a interview coming up this weekend. I'm like, oh, great. Tell me more about your interview. Is it business casual? Do we need a suit? Is there a certain color you're looking for? So practicing those social skills, I think it's just more social skills than anything. When you're working on confidence, but it's also experience, right? The more experience you have, the more comfortable you feel, the more confident you can, do something.
Right. And I know that confidence plays into a huge role when it ever comes to public speaking. I think most people have some sort of fear of public speaking. I mean, you're not going to find many people whose heart doesn't flutter before they walk onto a big stage and give a talk. And is that something that you've kind of learned to get used to, not be nervous about, or does it still make you nervous to this day?
I mean, it definitely, like, you still get like the pounding heart, like, like the heavy breathing and all that. But as soon as you start talking, then everything kind of calms down. So, I mean, I think even if you do it over and over again, like still being in front of an audience, right? Because you are getting judged. They are, they're hearing what you have to say. Like those physiological responses are still there. But if you have confidence, right? What do I always say? Confidence is key, right? So if I'm giving a report or a presentation, let's say in class, if I'm not prepared, then I'm going to be kind of like, you'll know, like from my demeanor and the way I stand and the way I speak. But if I come in and I'm prepared and I know exactly what I'm going to do, I mean, it shows. And I don't even need to look at my presentation, and I kind of just go with the flow, and I'll, be spewing this facts and this facts. And it all ends up coming together. So I think the biggest thing is just, you have to be prepared.
So how does one prepare and know how to look confident? What did they teach you in beauty pageantry that you thought was super useful and you now still apply to this day?
We had an acronym. It was called POISE. I can't for the life of me remember what it stands for anymore, because it's been 10 years since I've been in the industry on that side. I've always wanted to do a beauty pageant down here, but the systems, it's tricky. It's trickier down here for some reason. Well, for me anyway. But
it is Hollywood, so
yeah, there you go. I bet you I could Google it and figure out what it means. But POISE always stood for something. Each letter stood for something. That was just kind of one thing that we had to remember to uphold, when we were out in public, and things like that. But
what was the, one that was just obvious that you still remember to this day? It doesn't have to be every single letter.
I forgot the question.
What? I guess what?
I was like, wait a second.
The question I just asked you a moment ago, or
no, the other one, because I was thinking so hard about the POISE acronym. I'm like, man, what is it?
Yeah,
like,
I was just asking what general teachings did they impart to you in beauty pageantry school, if there was a school that you took to heart and you still practice to this day?
I mean, the biggest thing is just always be yourself. You know, I mean, I think that's kind of like a common sense thing. Like, always be yourself, whether it's in person or on social media, because I think we see that a lot, right? People portray their own persona on social media, and then when you see them in person, I'm like, you are not like that at all. Like, you can just totally tell. And I think you just got to be real with yourself. You know, you got to be true to yourself. And if you're going to portray yourself like one way, and I know there's like a whole psychological, thing on social media with the way people portray themselves, but the way they actually feel and things like that. But if you could just figure out how to channel both of those and be okay with portraying what people see out here in this world and what people see, face to face, that's going to make you so much more of a genuine person. And people are really people are gonna see it, and it's gonna shine through, and that's gonna apply to all aspects.
And that's why you talk about your chicken tenders, right?
Yeah, that's why I talk about my chicken tenders so much. Oh man.
Okay, so I just looked up poise.
Okay.
And this is what I found. P is prompt arrival and professional appearance. Mm-hmm. O is observe. I is introduce. S is smile. And E is eye contact.
None of that sounds familiar, to be quite honest.
Okay. Maybe I found the right poise.
Actually, I think I have it written somewhere on my Facebook. I've actually had some friends who, like we first met each other and they went into a deep dive on my Facebook. And they were like, I see you did some beauty pageants back in the day. And I was like, oh my gosh, you got to go like way, way back to look at some of those. But I don't know if I could even find it on here.
Maybe one of them is word choice because you chose to use deep dive instead of stalking.
Yes, that could possibly be it too, no doubt.
What are some misconceptions about beauty pageantry that most people don't really understand unless they've done it themselves?
I mean, I think it's, what you see like on reality TV, right? Like big hair, whiny moms, like prissy kids. I mean, maybe I'm going a little too far, but I think people have this persona of like these women are kind of like all about themselves. Like they look like, especially when you get into older, like, Miss America and things like that. I think the beauty pageant system has maybe changed a little bit. Like you've seen over the years, at first it was, swimwear, and then, your formal wear, and then your talent wear. And, all these people, if you ever watched Miss America, I don't know if you have, but, it was my favorite thing to watch, like growing up, because I wanted to learn from them. Like, how are they walking? Are they doing, what are they doing in their swimwear? Are they doing a little twirl? How are they answering their interview questions? But recently, you've seen over the past years, instead of just being this face and looking really nice, over these past years, they've maybe have dove a little bit deeper into like, well, what charity do they support? What are they doing in their community? The talent portion has changed drastically. It's not about, what musical instrument, can you play, or like or like a ballet dancer, and things like that. Now I remember, I wish I knew what Miss America was. One of the girls read a poem on stage. Like that was her talent. And that was everyone was just blown away by it because no one's ever thought of that before, right? And no one really thinks of that as a talent, right? Because it's not something you can physically see or do. Mm-hmm. It's writing, but that's definitely talent. That's something I could not never do. So it's interesting to see kind of the shift. It's kind of changed over the years. Also, I believe Donald Trump was the owner of Miss America. I don't know if he still is. So there's that whole controversy sort of thing. Also, Miss Universe is also really interesting too, because then you get even more elaborate,
right?
On those things. So I guess going back to your question of how people portray, I mean, I think growing up, it was more this prissy, snobby sort of person, because you're into yourself, your hair and your makeup and, your nails and all that. Which is why I didn't like doing the first set of beauty pageants, because that's what it was, right? You had to be like that. You had to fit that look, where the other one was based on you and your personality and how you uphold yourself, and what are you going to do with your life and your future and your community? How are you going to better yourself and better those people around you? So that's kind of the shift in the differences, and why I geared or lean towards that side, because you always want to bring that different perspective to people and be like, hey, it's not like this. Like, I'm super involved. I'm deep in this, and this is how I am, right? We're not all, like this, and how the other people, you see on TV and whatnot. So I don't know if it's different now. Like I said, that was like 10 years ago, but that was always kind of my perspective on what I wanted to bring and what I wanted people to see.
So when you were involved with the Chamber of Commerce and all those sorts of activities, I think one of the things you probably had to learn was learning how to connect with people, not only, I guess, face to face every once in a while, but you really have to like remember them and connect with them on a deeper level. And given that half the population are introverts, that can be harder for some people to do. So it seems like as a child you were more introverted than extroverted.
Yes,
is my guess. So how did you I guess learn to connect with people? And I don't know if you're still introverted, but eventually blossom out of that shell and be able to just engage with a conversation with any person off the street.
I think it was like growing up, it was just me, right? So I was the kid that wanted to play in the dirt. Like I remember I don't know if it was my grandma or my mom signed me up for ballet class, and I was like, I just want to go roll around in the grass. Like, I don't want to be in here. Like, I always wore like the tomboy clothes. Like, I had a Ninja Turtle bike. I had like the basketball. Like, I just wanted to do whatever the guys were doing. Like, I didn't really want to be like, I still had my dolls and things like that, but I was more interested like on the activities side of things. So it was very much to myself, but I knew how to keep myself active, right? Like, I remember telling my grandma, I was like, I want to be an artist. So we went out, and she got me like the oil paints and the canvas and the easel. And I was like trying to paint. Obviously I was like absolutely terrible. But that's something I enjoyed doing. Or, playing with my dad actually built me this wooden dollhouse, like completely huge wooden thing. It was like the most awesomest thing, and I play with that. And then I had like my tree fort in the backyard. So I didn't really need to, I guess, interact with people. Also, the street I grew up on, was a busy street, and there were no kids my age in the neighborhood. It was just me. So taking the street, there no kids, I had a great sized yard. So I didn't have those other interactions with other neighbor kids because there was no one there. But I also had enough activity to keep to myself. Mm-hmm. Like, I didn't need anyone, I guess, to keep busy. And then on the weekends, my parents are huge, like, water skiers. So every single weekend, literally out on the Sacramento River, out water skiing. And I hated it. Absolutely hated it. So, now you take that too, right? So now I'm just surrounded by family. Mm-hmm. And then if my family members come out, like, they're older. If you look at my family, it's like my brother, my sister, and all the cousins are up here. And then it's me. Mm-hmm. And then it's all their children. Yeah. So there's this huge gap. So it's like, do I hang out with the older people, or do I sit at the little kid table? It's this kind of like weird thing. But, growing up, I was like, fine. So that's when I became more, I guess, extroverted, was when I started doing beauty pageants. And then when I started working retail, right? Because you have to talk to people. Like, you can't just work retail and not talk to people, right, unless you're in the back all day. And then maybe I remember my mom she made me get a job at 16, and I was pissed because I didn't want to work. It was summertime, right? Like, I don't want to work. I don't want to do that. But I actually really liked it. So I was coaching. I was a coach during the summer. And I got, I coached kind of like in the Sacramento County area. So being a coach and working with kids and, working with their parents too. So I think you take the beauty pageants, the coaching, and the retail experience, add those all up. That's how I had, I guess, learned to be a little more extrovert than introvert. Do I have my introvert days? Yeah. Like, sometimes I'm like, I just do not want to go anywhere. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to be here. Like, I don't want to be like, no social media. Like, I just just need to chill out sometimes, right? Because it's a lot being around people all the time,
Right.
but I don't mind it. Like 99% of the time, like I rather be socially around people. So
how did you, given all these, I mean, it makes sense since you were into sports in your childhood, but eventually how did you find your way into endurance, athletics? You talked about basketball, you talked about, I don't know how much you participated in water skiing, but how did you find your way into running?
So I grew up, obviously playing sports. Like I wanted to be in the WNBA when I was little. Like I was hardcore into basketball, wearing, like my basketball shorts and my cutoffs and like my sweatbands and everything. Like I loved basketball. Basketball was like basically life. And then I got introduced to like other sports. So I played competitive soccer, competitive volleyball, competitive basketball. And that was like the majority of my life. So I was playing school ball, and then on top of that, I was playing competitive on the outside. So I was playing 2 sports at once, year round. It was just nonstop. And eventually kind of did end up getting burned out, I think a little bit in my senior year, where I had to decide, because I also was running track too in high school. Hated track. Running was so dumb back in high school. It just hurt so bad. So I did volleyball, basketball, soccer, and I ran track all 4 years of high school until the last year I tore my ACL playing soccer.
Hold on. You did 4 sports in 1 year. Was that because you were able to do 1 sport a season, or were you doing multiple sports in a given season?
Soccer and track season were in the same season.
Okay.
So like I would go from soccer practice to track practice, or, if I had like a day off, I would do 1 sport or the other. But then at the same time, there was also an overlap too when I was playing competitive volleyball. So there was kind of an overlap there as well. So almost playing like 3 sports almost at once. And then I tore my ACL playing soccer, and I was like, oh my God, my life is over. I'm never going to play sports again. And this is it. Like, it was so devastating, right? Because you're a senior in high school and you're like, okay, now what am I going to do? Like, you hear about ACL tears all the time, and most of the time they're like career ending for most people. Well, back in the day, now not so much, but it was just like the worst experience to have ever gone through, and the longest like road to recovery, because I was so over it and I didn't want to recover, and I was going to like physical therapy like 5 days a week. Eventually, obviously, got out of therapy or physical therapy, went to school. Things like being active again was not the same. Like I never went to go back and play soccer. It never felt right. Like it didn't feel the same. Like stopped playing basketball, I think my sophomore year or junior year. Like I just didn't want to play it anymore. What else was there? Oh yeah, and then obviously I stopped playing volleyball because now I was in school, and I was like thought about it low key trying out for like the junior college volleyball team, because I'm like I just loved it so much. But then I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like they're never gonna pick me. I'm too short. Like that means I'm gonna have to play defense. What if I ride the bench all season? Like I was never. That was like so going back to the confidence thing, right? I hated sitting on the bench, because then I thought I wasn't good. I was like, I have to be a starter. If I'm not a starter, then I'm not good. If I'm not a starter, then I'm not working hard enough. So that like thing always got to me. But anyways, so went into college, and when I went to school, my mom made me live on the dorms, which was the worst decision ever because I didn't want to do it.
And where did you go to school?
Oh, I went to Cal State Northridge, so CSUN.
So that was a move from Sacramento to LA.
Yes.
Basically.
Sacramento to LA. And it was, at the time, what I thought was going to be the worst decision ever, because I'm like older. They're like 18. Like, this is going to be weird. And then I remember moving in, and no one was there. No one was there, right? I was like, cool, whatever. And then I came downstairs, and there was like this girl there, and she was like, oh, are you Jen? And I was like, yeah. She's like, hey, I'm Jess. I'm your roommate. And I was like, oh, cool. Hey, Jess. And we've been best friends ever since. That's literally how it started. But anyways, to go back to my story, she was like, hey, you want to play rugby? And I was like, oh, yeah. Like this, I want to get back into sports again, right? Still a little weird with my knee. At this time, it had been 4 years since I had torn my ACL. And I could still feel the remnants of like that surgery and everything like that. So playing was still kind of like iffy. Anyways, I played for one season because then I graduated. But I just remember like during that time, my floor mate at the time, I lived in the kinesiology. That's what I got my degree in. So I lived in the kinesiology floor, basically. So it's kind of cool. We're all kin majors. And my professor at the time did a LA Marathon training program. He did it every year. And I remember my floor mate had signed up for the LA Marathon. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And every Saturday she would go out to Santa Clarita. There was a running group out there called Happy Feet. I don't think they're still, around anymore, but she would go out there every Saturday to train, and she would put in her miles and all that stuff. And I always wanted to go, but I always worked on the weekends, right? Because I went to school Monday through Friday, and I had to work. I just worked Saturday and Sunday. So I'm like, I could never make it. And so I just remember like her whole training process was, her friends and I think some of her family members were like, you can never run a marathon. You don't look like a runner. Like, you're not going to be able to do this sort of thing. And I was like, that's so fucked up. Like, that's so messed up. But whatever. She was out there every Saturday. It was nuts. And she made this huge commitment. And I don't know if you remember the 2000 LA Marathon. Basically, it was like the 2018 Boston. I mean, it rained so hard that day. I just remember I was out in the valley. I had to work. And there was like tree branches, like full on trees, like in the middle of the street. And the rain was literally going sideways. I mean, it was terrible, terrible weather. And I just remember I'm like, she's out there running this damn thing. Oh my God. Is she going to be okay? And she finished her first damn marathon, and she finished. And I was just like so inspired by that. I was like, that's badass. I want to do that too. So the marathon was in March, signed up for my first marathon in April, ran it in October. So this is when I knew nothing about running, right? The only marathon I knew of was Nike Women's Marathon. Wanted to run it because obviously you get a Tiffany's necklace, right? Like that's really cool.
Yeah.
And so I signed up. College students at the time got a discount, so the marathon was like $90, which is like unheard of for any marathon. And I was like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run my first marathon. What I didn't know is you could run shorter distances.
And still get the necklace.
No.
Okay.
I didn't know there were such things you could run a half marathon and still get the necklace.
Okay.
But I didn't know you could run, I didn't know there was 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. Like I didn't know there was other distances you could run. I thought running was just marathons.
Right. I mean, some runners say like I'm running a 5K marathon. Like they always tag the word marathon after it.
Yeah. And I'm just like, and I didn't do because I didn't know anything about running, right? So I mean, I didn't do any pre-racing or anything. I printed out the Nike, I don't know, was it 12-week training program? I was just checking off the box each week. And, ran my first, I remember running 13 miles before work, and I showed up late and I just looked at my boss and I was like, I can't walk. I just ran 13 miles. It just seemed so far and so ridiculous. And it's funny because, so I used to train, obviously, like I said, again, Nike just did a great job. Like I didn't know there was other brands of running shoes. Everything I had was Nike. My socks were Nike, sports bras, my clothes, my shoes, my watch was Nike. I don't know if you guys remember that Nike watch that came out. That thing was huge. Took forever to get a GPS signal. I used the Nike app. I don't even know how I managed to get through. And so that was kind of the transition, I guess, into my first marathon, was basically just getting inspired by my floor mate. And the biggest reason why I stuck with it is because I was actually so sick and tired of team sports. It's going to sound terrible. I was so sick and tired of team sports because if I put in hard work, I expect everyone else to put in that hard work. And if they goof off and, they around and comes game day and we're shit up, yeah, I'm going to get pissed. I'm going to piss because I show up every day and I put in the work, but you guys are over here, around. Not that any, like my rugby teammates, never did that or anything, but it was just, I always got put into positions that were decision positions. That makes sense. And so I always put myself to a higher level or to a higher standard, because if I don't make that play, then no play is going to happen. So I always looked for perfection. And I think I started getting tired of it. So for example, in the volleyball, I was a setter, right? You get past the ball, you set it up for the hit. If you don't have a good set, you can't play off of that, right? Basketball, I was a point guard. I call the play. If I don't call the right play or make the right move, okay, what are you going to do? In rugby, I was a wing, basically the outside. Basically, you just throw me the ball and I run up and down the field, right? But then they put me at scrummy, which is like the quarterback. So just always in these high pressure positions. And that's probably, again, where I had confidence but didn't have confidence, right? Because I expected perfection from myself. Where running, it's all in you. Like, you don't have to rely on anyone. You don't train, don't expect to do well, right? You put in the hard work, then you're probably going to do well. So I kind of like that whole perspective. And I think that's why I really stuck with running, because it's very autonomous and you can do it by yourself and you don't need anyone around. You don't need to rely on anyone. Or you can do it in a group, right? And it can be fun. In the whole, the whole challenge of it all. And oh God, running sucked in the beginning. But
I mean, how did you get through it? You just check boxes. I'm just going to keep doing it.
And I think this is a very interesting thing. If you think back to your first race, or maybe specifically your first marathon, my first marathon was disastrous. We could go into that. There's so many things that happened, right. And I somehow got through it. I didn't know what a good marathon time was. I just knew I wanted to run a 4-hour marathon. I'm like, that seems reasonable. I don't even know what pace that was. I know now, but I was like, yeah, 4 hours seems like that's normal. I think that's normal. Anyways, I ran the marathon in 4:01, essentially, after like dying after mile, I think 12 or 13. Like, how am I going to get through this? My stomach hurt so bad. And then I threw up, and then I probably like shit my pants, and then like, all this other stuff.
TMI.
But when you cross that finish line, you just get very overwhelmed and emotional, and you're like, holy shit, I just did that. Like, it was such a phenomenal feeling that I don't get anymore because I've done it so many times.
Yeah, you need that next high.
I need that next high, which leads me into some other things that I had done because I wasn't getting that high from running. But, after I ran my first marathon, I was like, oh, now I want to run LA marathon. Oh, there's a challenge. If you run LA and SF, you get this like double bling medal. Yeah, I want to do that too. So then you start falling into that cycle. But it was basically that kind of, one, it was that feeling of crossing the finish line and being like, I can't believe I just did that. And then two, it's like, oh, well, now I have to qualify for Boston. Like now that I got another challenge I got to do, right? And so you want to see how fast you can get from there and work towards that. So there's always these little goals in the beginning of my running, when I first started running, that I was always just like chasing, whether it was, qualifying for Boston or, if you run these 3 races, you get all these 3 medals, and things like that. So those were kind of the motivations, I think, that kept me going.
I guess, what have you learned that you don't think most runners know about and you think it would be important that most runners realize?
That's a good question. I don't know. Actually.
Do you think runners have a pretty good idea generally of all the exercise science that is out there?
I mean, I would assume so. Or it's just so easy to look something up, and kind of, I guess, look for the answer you're looking for. But I also think it comes with experience too, right? Like, it's the way I used to think when I first started running and the way I used to think now is just completely different. I'm like, oh, I was an idiot. 9 years ago when I first started running, I'm like, that was completely, that I don't know why I did that. And for an example, and I see a lot of runners do this now, and I think it's an important concept to think about, and really take in. sometimes my training would be a little spotty going into a marathon because I just was tired, didn't want to put in the work, didn't have enough time, whatever. But to give me confidence to go into a marathon, I knew if I could run a 20 miler, then I'd be fine. So I would force myself to go out and run these 20 milers. And it was like the most ridiculous thing because it really made no sense, because sometimes I just end up walking and then I'd like try and run and then I'd take like 3 steps and I ended up like walking again. I'm like, I'm only at mile like 14. I'm like, I could do 6 more. And it was just, there was going to be no benefit from that besides injuring myself and just shattering everything that was going on. But that mentality of like, I have to run 20 miles for a marathon. And that was like my biggest keystone. I was like, yes, you have to run a 20 miler. No matter how fast or slow you are, you have to run a 20 miler. Like, that's the only way you're going to be prepared. And I remember 2017, I was training for the Chicago Marathon, and Victor was like, I have this training program for you, right? And he was like, just try it out. Like, there's no 20 milers. And I was like, oh my God, thank God. I don't have to run a 20 miler. The highest mileage long run that I had to run was 17 miles. That was it. And I did it maybe, I don't know, 3 times, something like that. And all I had to do was just follow this training plan. It was 6 days a week, like my 2 workouts, my long run. That was it. Rest day. I had a rest day. Yeah. I can't tell you how much I look forward to that rest day. It was like heaven. It was like, I don't have to run today. But the rest day was always in between my 2 workouts. So it's like I had to get through the workout first. And it was such a great feeling not knowing I didn't have to do that 20 miler. And I was like, yeah, I can handle 17 miles. And, I was just ready for a change. And when I came around and ran that marathon, I PR'd by like 15 minutes, and it just completely blew my mind. I was like, holy shit, I don't have to run a 20 miler ever again. I was like, I just completely like blew out my PR, and I've never finished a race so much stronger too. So I think if I had to maybe, I guess, say one takeaway, and again, this is, from experience and personal bias, if you just stay consistent with your running and you can run consistently 5-6 days a week, without overdoing it, you don't have to run a 20 miler. Like, I mean, unless you're like that super competitive elite, up there, like, okay, yeah, you actually got to run those 20 milers. Like, you can't get around that. But I think just more of your average general runner, like, you just stay consistent, 17 miles.
Right. I think it goes back to hitting the big targets first, right? If you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, what's the point of training so hard if you're, not setting yourself up for success? In the same way, why do the 20 milers before you can do the 16 milers well? So it's just like, do the things that matter first before thinking about like, what are the extra things I need to do to get that last few percent of extra performance? Right.
And I think that definitely nails it right there. Like, if you can't nail down those easier miles, then you got to kind of have a reality check with you and be like, hey, I got to work on this, but it's hard. I mean, it's completely hard. I'm completely guilty of doing it. So, I mean, it's just, I think that's the difference between a beginner runner, and a more experienced runner, or maybe a not so smart runner and a smart runner, just muscle minnows on that one.
So we're going to finish up this episode now with my favorite part, the quick fire round. So are you ready?
No. Okay,
no?
Go. Okay.
Go. Work hard or play hard?
Play hard.
Do you enjoy the process or the reward?
Reward.
During runs, do you listen to music, podcasts, or neither?
Neither.
Favorite running apparel?
Oh, a good crop top. Sports bra.
And what brand?
Oh, you can't do that. That was so hard.
At the moment. It could change.
Well, okay, let's be real. I'm not wearing any crop tops right now at the moment because I look like a stuffed sausage in them. So I just can't. But Tracksmith and Rabbit.
Okay.
There we go.
What was your hardest or toughest race?
Ooh. It's definitely been a marathon and a trail race. I can't tell you which one. Ray Miller a couple years ago, I did the 30K. So I'm not a cramper. I don't cramp. And I just cramped this hill. I can't, it's called like Hell Hill, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's early on, isn't it?
Well, it's on the later half for the 30K.
Oh,
you
gotcha.
climb and then you descend, right?
Okay.
So it was basically the last climb.
Gotcha.
And I was racing so hard, I think I just dehydrated myself. And I remember Victor and our friend Ishmael were out there like cheering me on, and they just saw me walking. They're like, oh my God. They're like, all right, you're going to run for a minute and then just walk for a minute. And I'm like, okay. I like took 3 steps and I just cramped so hard. And I'm like, what the is going on? Like I've never experienced that. So I would say that's definitely one of them.
Yeah.
The cramping.
So you know how it feels to have that almost every race now. I mean, given that I cramp up at it.
Yes, it's terrible. People who cramp, man, I really feel for you. It's happened one other time in another race. But man, it's rough. It's rough because you want to move and you want to keep going, and every single time you think it's like gone, you just seize.
Yeah, and your heart rate's down. You're just like not working hard, but you just can't do anything about it.
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
All right. What is your favorite running shoe, and what is your least favorite running shoe?
Oh, you're gonna go there. Okay, so right now I'm running in the 361 Phantom. I like it because it has a knit upper and a roomy toe box, but it's still super, super light. My least favorite running shoe, I don't know. I got a lot of them. But if I had to say, like right now, it would be any type of racing flat. Because I did work out in one of them the other day, and I couldn't walk for like 3 days because my calves were so tight.
Yeah.
So my racing flat.
Those will do it. What is your favorite or go-to post-run meal?
It depends.
After a race.
Oh, it's usually nothing. Because, well, you know, like when you race really hard, you're just like, I'm not hungry. And I usually end up eating soup. Like it's really, really lame. But my stomach always hurts so bad after a hard race. I just can't really like digest anything. But if I was feeling great and everything was like awesome, if it's the summertime, it's usually a beer and a salad. Like I want to be healthy but a little naughty at the same time. In the wintertime, usually something like heavy, like a breakfast burrito or like a burger, like something kind of like substantial to kind of fill in everything.
It's hibernation season. Yeah,
exactly.
And then handheld or vest bladders?
Vest.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely vest.
And finally, my favorite question, what book, blog, or podcast would you recommend everyone give a chance to try?
Ooh.
Or Netflix show, whatever you're consuming.
Oh my God. I'm like super obsessed right now with the 30 for 30s on ESPN. So The Last Dance was fire with Michael Jordan. Even though I'm not a huge basketball fan, that was really kind of informative. Second one I'm obsessed with is Lance Armstrong. If you guys haven't watched that, that just came out 2 weeks ago. This is a 2-part series. I'm a big Lance fan and I'm not a big Lance fan. So that's a good one now. And now they have a Bruce Lee one out, which is, again, another phenomenal one. So you guys should watch that 30 for 30 episodes if you haven't done it already.
Okay, well, that was Jennifer Sunahara. You can find her on Strava and on Instagram at AsianGen, AZN_Jen. Thanks.
You're welcome.